In this video, we're going to look at how to estimate hardwood floor installation project. We will look at the consideration factors. We'll look at why is this important to know how to do the estimation. We'll look at considerations, what should you take into account when you're doing your estimation project, and a lot of other different things. What we will not do, we will not show how to do actual installation. There are so many different floor types, and it's hard to encompass all the different details of hardwood floor installation in just one video. We'll focus on the financial side of it, how to do estimate the floor installation. So why would you consider to learn how to do estimation? Why is this important? Number one is this is important because you want to get the best value for the amount of money that you want to spend, right? And in order to do that, you want to make sure you understand where the number is coming from and what's coming into account when you're doing the estimation. Another one is to avoid cost overruns, right? That's another huge factor when you're doing home improvement projects. I always make sure that I have full control of the costs myself. I love to do it. And kind of you don't have anybody else to blame. You kind of understand what's involved, and sometimes there are risks and you do have cost overruns, but you are in the control of this, right? And then you get a quality results, right? Because you understand the difference between labor cost, preparation cost, material cost, and a lot of other things that go into an account. And you can control timing of your execution, right? When you know what are the tasks that's involved, you can certainly plan and execute them the best way possible for yourself. So let's take a look. How would you do estimates? We do an estimate for the square room, right? And we have size A of the room and size B, and size A is 20 feet and size B is 15 feet, right? So the total room size is 300 square feet. That's multiplication of 20 by 15, right? We're also concerned about perimeter, right? Because that would be 20 by 2 plus 15 by 2. Right, so that would be 30 plus 40, that would be 70. And that's important for the trim installation. So what we're going to do here, we're going to look at tasks that I've identified for this project, and we'll put units of measure, and we'll do estimated cost in this column, and we'll also have column for actuals. That's actually helpful when you're actually running and executing the project, so you track what you've estimated and what were the actuals for this particular task, and that helps you improve next time you do your estimation. Right, so let's look at the first thing, which is area preparation, right? Furniture move, etc. This is when you need to clean up your room, right? So when you do an installation, you have existing room, and this is the time when you actually need to prepare it, right? Move all the furniture, shelvings, chairs, tables, whatever you have in that room somewhere outside. So units of measure here, depending if you want to do it yourself, obviously that's free, right? If you want to do it with somebody else's help, that's ours. That would be our units of measure, and then typically 2 to 3 hours, and that's based on the hourly cost. So let's estimate it $50 an hour, and that's another important consideration. You want to make sure you understand what contractors are using for their hourly rate when they do an estimate. So let's just do 4 multiplied by 50. All right, that's $50 an hour. That would be 200, and I'll just use $ for Excel. Next thing on my list is the subfloor preparation. So depending which subfloor you have, and subfloor, it's what underneath of your floor, you might run into different costs associated with this, right? For example, you may have tile room that has tile, so what do you do? Or you may have room that has carpet currently, and then what do you do there, right? So it's important to understand that different types of subfloors, or maybe you have existing hardwood floor. So what you want to do, you want to research, right? Typically what you see in the modern houses, you see plywoods on the floor in the picture like this, and then you put, you either nail the floor to that subfloor, or you do a floating floor, or you do a lot of other different things. A lot of options available now, but it's important that you understand what's actually involved, and you look at what kind of subfloors you have, right? This is typically the floor, right? Multiple layers of plywood or another material, which you can nail to. It's much harder to nail to the tile, so that's probably worth doing. For example, if you're putting floor on the tile, you do insulation from the moisture, and then you put a floating floor on top of that. So if we look here, in our chart we have a subfloor preparation, right? And that's here you would have to estimate what's needed, and it's very unique, and probably depending what you have. Maybe you have carpet, let's say carpet, then you have all carpet removal, right? Because you can't put hard floor in the carpet, and then you need to do floor preparation itself. Maybe if in case of tile you want to either put a subfloor on, or you can do floating floor, but that's something to consider, right? So it's optional tasks, only if necessary, but you kind of have to know and maybe consult with somebody before you do it. Good way to consult with somebody: you bring in and invite somebody for the estimation, and people will tell you. A lot of times there's a free estimate, and as you will be doing this estimation chart, you can ask questions, and experts typically very willing to give you the answers. So it's important to understand what type of installation you would be doing. And the best way to find out is to consult with experts, or you can pay somebody to just come in for the consultation, right? And they will provide you not just the estimate, but also the plan and step by step what they're going to be doing. Before we continue, let's take a look at the quick important part of the hardwood floor installation, which may or may not be applicable to other floor types, right? We have a trim and quarter round. That's typical finish for the areas that connect to the wall, right? So when you're doing your estimate, it's important not to forget about trim and quarter round, or maybe there are some other different types of finishing, as we will see in a second. For example, if you look in Google, you see how other can finish the floor. Some of them I'm not very familiar with, but you can probably pick the right type of finish for yourself. This is the typical one I use. Trim and quarter round, but you might like something else, and there are a lot of different options. Another thing to consider is the noise molding, right? This is a T-molding. This is sometimes when you connect different types of rooms with different floor, or if you want to make a separator between the same flooring, you use this T-nose. Those typically are rather expensive, and that's something for you important to consider, right? So in addition to hardwood floor, you also need to consider trim. You need to consider noise molding, that's for stairs, and then T-molding, and potentially some other things. As you can see, this image shows a lot of different types of finishes that exist for the floor. So as we're approaching main part of estimation, let's take a look at different considerations of which you want to make sure you account for when you look at hardwood floor estimation. So what we're looking at, number one, is material is priced per square foot. That's why if we go back to the estimator, it's important for you to measure your room first, right? So you want to know size A and size B. You might be asking, okay, what if I have more odd shape room, right? So what do I do? There's no easy answer, right? So there are different ways how to measure a square footage of the room, and then perimeter of the room, right? You kind of have to adjust based on what your room type is, right? Another thing to consider is the more odd shape room is, the harder it is potentially to install the floor. Typically the most value and least expensive estimate is for the square types rooms. Another thing is you want to measure size of the room, right? And for the odd shape room, as I mentioned, more labor is involved. That's point number 2 here on the list. Third thing to consider, it's important to pick the floor. And to do that, the easiest way is to do order samples and select the hardwood floor type, maybe manufacturer or the model. The benefit here is that if you know what you want, if you know the color, or the finish, the manufacturer, the part number, then you can shop around on the internet and find the cost-effective seller of this particular item, and that would definitely help you find what you want at the least expensive cost, right? Because the important thing to keep in mind is when you hire somebody to bring their own floor and do their own installation, typically they do markup, not just on the labor, right, where you pay majority of the cost for hardwood floor installation, but you also they also charge you markup on the material itself. Important thing to keep in mind when you come to the website, let's take Build Direct, that's a good website. I never purchased from it myself, but it seems very good because it has a lot of reviews and you can do a lot of comparisons and a lot of different floor types. So what's important, you see how many different types of floor you have, and let's pick something that might be on sale, right? So you pick based on what you want. And the good thing is you can read the reviews, right? You can look and enter the coverage, right? We now know how to estimate by multiplying the perimeter on the square foot room size. Then you look at the images, then you want to look at, you might also need section, right? And it shows you that you might need some underlayment to protect against the moisture, maybe underlayment to do some softer walking. And you can read the reviews, which I think are extremely important because those are independent and from people that's typically had similar challenges that you had, and they solved their problems by purchasing here and leaving the reviews, right? So reviews are very good indication of social proof, and if there are good reviews, then there's high chance that this is a really good floor itself. Also, a lot of sites like this let you offer samples. I can't see specifically on this one if you can get sample, but a lot of other sites actually do offer sample. A couple other things to keep in mind, right? What kind of subfloors you have, right? How easy it is going to be to do installation. That will determine the cost of labor and maybe potential materials if you need to add additional layer of subfloor. Right, types of installation, that's something we've talked about. You can nail to the floor, you can do floating floors. They're not connected to the subfloor, they just what's called float on top of it. Do you have stairs or connected rooms? How do you want to handle? Something to consider, right? If you're doing it just for one room, or you eventually want to do it for the entire house, entire floor. So the better image you have of what you're going to do, the better it is, because it helps you estimate overall. Maybe right now you'll just do one room, but later when you have more money, you can do other rooms, hallways and some other areas, right? Maybe you want to leave carpets or tile, and then how would you want to connect it, right? So we've looked at some of the options of what you need to have. So that adds additional cost and how you would want to handle this. Maybe you would want to follow a specific pattern. For example, these are the images of how you might want to consider connecting your floor, right? So this is tile and this is hardwood floor. That's one of the examples. This is specific pattern, right? So that's probably very hard to do. So if you want something like this, you probably would want to make sure that you plan for the high cost of installation, because this is not easy to do, right? Some other things, this is how you might connect tiling in the hardwood floor. So that's where the T connector that you use, and there are a lot of other options like this kitchen option, right? You have hardwood floor, then you have one type of tile, and then you have another type of tile. So different designs, a lot of options are available. What you want to do, the clearer picture you have of what you want, the easier it is to control the costs. Because if you don't know what you want and then you try something and you don't like it, it's much harder to redo it versus just have a good plan of what you want. And this is a good image of how you do connect the floor, for example, on the stairs. You have a nose connector, and then this is the same floor that you have, and this is how you connect carpet to the hardwood floor. So just searching for those images. In this particular example, I searched for hardwood floor trim image, and that's what came up on Google, along with a lot of different product offerings. So you can probably do similar search and come up with very similar results, or you can search for something else, but it's good to know your options. A couple other things to consider is, do you want to do self-installation versus hiring professional? A lot of people say, yeah, I want to save money and do self-installation. And sure you can, but you keep in mind you need to have the good tools in order to do quality installation. And you need to do a lot of research, and you want to do it right, because if it's not done right, then it's not just low level of satisfaction, it's also a challenge, because you can it's just not going to be liked by your spouse potentially, or by yourself, right? If depends. So you maybe want to practice and watch a lot of videos. There are a lot of videos how to do installation. This is not one of those, but you can definitely search and find them, right? We talked about strategy flooring the house. That's another important thing to keep in mind. What do you do not just for this room, but what do you want to do overall inside your house? And then prep work, keep this in mind. And then another thing to keep in mind when you do research online, it's hard to provide averages, right? So let's say you chose hiring professionals and somebody writes that, yeah, it costs $5 per square foot maybe to do installation, and plus the material cost. It might work for some areas, but may not work for your area. So a good way to do it is to bring in somebody to do estimates. Say what you want. Maybe you want to separate cost of materials and say, I want to buy materials myself. And installation, I just want to know what it takes, approximately how many hours per room. That's the good way to control the cost and save on the installation and understand and get different quotes and different options. And finally, let's do the estimate itself, right? So we're back to that document, and what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the floor preparation labor. That's the next item on our list. So what do we want to do? Let's just another way of estimating in hours, right? So let's say we want to remove carpet, and I'm going to estimate that this will take 3 hours at our cost of $50 an hour. So that would be 3 multiplied by 50, and that would be $150. Right, I'm just going to put a dollar sign here. Next thing we're going to do hardwood floor material. Right, so let's assume that we have a room size of 300 square feet, right? And our floor costs, the hardwood floor that we picked would cost $5 per square foot. Right, and so what we're going to do is the way we do the math here, and then we will just say it's equals 300 multiplied by 5, right? So that's the cost of the material. Estimating labor is rather hard sometimes, so and every person probably will give you a different estimate. I'm just using the ballpark number of 20 hours for this type of room, and our ongoing labor rate is $50 an hour, right? So what we're going to do is just going to enter it as 20 hours multiplied by the labor per hour rate, and that would give us $1,000, right, for the labor for this room. Now, this is, as I mentioned, very time consuming. So first of all, you need to estimate trim, and this is per linear feet most of the time, and typically trim is at one cost, and then quarter round is at another cost. So if you go to places like Home Depot, then you have different types of costs for different items, and that's per linear feet. If you buy from the same vendor, then that's the different type. So let's just estimate with the assumption that trim costs $2 per linear feet, and quarter round would be 70 cents per linear feet. So now we know what the cost is. So the overall linear feet would be $2.70. And again, you probably need to find out what it actually costs for your type of trim and quarter round, or maybe different type of finish that you want to put on your hardwood floor. So we have, in terms of linear feet, I mentioned 70 linear feet, right? So that's 15 plus 20, that's 35 multiplied by 2, that's 70. So in order for us to estimate the cost of material, that would be 70 multiplied by 2.7, and that's 189, right? That's dollars. And then, so I estimated both of those. It probably makes sense to remove it, but we'll just do labor for trim and quarter round, and that probably, let's estimate this work as 10-hour work, and that would be 10 multiplied by labor rate, and that's $500. So the total cost in this case is, let's just do auto sum, and let's make sure we add all the numbers, is $3,539 for this size of the room. Now, what are your cost saving strategies? That's this tab here. Let's take a look at those. Number one, if you're hiring professionals, get multiple quotes. Right, and then separating cost of materials and installation costs. We've talked about this and the importance of this. It allows you to control the costs, all right, and understand what are the costs that's involved. You also want to look at discount options. A lot of times, online retailers especially, they give you coupons, or maybe if it's a local vendor, you can get in-store promotions, right? Keep in mind, if you're ordering online, there might be shipping costs involved, so sometimes maybe it's worth picking the vendor that ships free. Right, you want to compare online retailers and local retailers. For that, it's important for you to determine the vendor that you want to buy from. Right, maybe cars. That's the floors I use. That's pretty good. But there are plenty of other brands. So sometimes brands are not generic, right? So you can't go and shop for the same brand. Maybe places like Costco, they have typically their own vendor, and it might be exclusive vendor that only you sell at Costco, for example, right? So you can't go and shop for the same brand at Home Depot or ifloors.com. Right, so some retailers you can compare costs. For some vendors you can't compare costs. Hope this video was helpful. If you want to stay in touch, please subscribe. Click the subscribe button and make sure to visit howtoanalyzedata.net to download free copy of this Excel document. Thank you very much.